Man, that would have been way funnier if I wasn't muted.
Were you talking?
I was out. Yeah, I was just like, oh, I might have to go. I just got a notification that my favorite YouTube show is live now, and it's us.
That would have been funnier if you were not muted.
Would have fucking crushed.
What is up, Johnny boy? Shout out John Hartman.
Man, I inadvertently have like a real teal and orange thing happening, which it works.
It kind of complements what I got going on.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm my studio, as you can see if you're watching the video version here. Things look a little bit different than they usually have. They're kind of the same, but they're kind of different too, and that is because I just relocated into a different room in the house. Before I was in just one of the spare bedrooms, but now I'm in the master bedroom, which is the largest bedroom in the house, obviously. And it just had it worked better with trying to figure out where we're gonna have a guest room, where we're gonna put Amy with the baby, because she sleeps with the baby at night, so that I can get a full night's sleep, so that I can get up earlier and relieve her. And so we needed a better place to situate all the different bedrooms and everything. So it just worked best with bringing me in here. And I like the idea too, because there was some things I wanted to do with the shot that were a little different, but I tried to get it all crammed into one day, and just there was no way I could do it all. So instead, I feel like I got hit by a truck, and waking up this morning after rearranging all the furniture and carrying a king mattress around and stuff, and so I feel like I got hit by a truck, and I didn't get everything finished. So I kind of threw something together to work real well. My favorite thing that I've been incorporating is this K right here. I thought it would be kind of cool to represent the brand with a little thing. And I was thinking about how it would be, I'm not going to do this, but it would be cool to have it just like on the wall behind it, have it continue and just say King Pilled all the way across. There's about 5 feet from the K to the wall. So it would be kind of a task to accomplish that. But anyway, so that's why there's this really awkwardly tight shot on me today, because everything is just kind of a disaster zone right outside the shot. But as soon as everything gets finished, it's going to look great, I promise.
I don't want to undercut Matthew here, if I might call him Matthew, but he texted me and he said, I think it's time that the show gets sexier. I'm going to have a nice tight shot. The old moneymaker.
Don't tell him.
Okay. Well, what I'll tell the supporting listeners in the group later is, as opposed to hit by a truck, the wording that what Matthew actually used when he mentioned how he was feeling today.
Yeah. It was
not for YouTube.
It was slightly more non-YouTube. It was something tube, that's for sure. Let me get this. Link tweeted out.
It was a tube, all right. I'd like to thank Smoothie King for supporting the show. King. Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh, we got
added tart cherries today.
Tart cherries.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
One of the nice features of the Smoothie King app is every once in a while they'll throw something at you like that.
Well,
and just remember when you download the free app to use promo code KingPilled, and they'll put mud water in any smoothie that you ask for.
Mud water, and when you use promo code, what was it? Kingpilled? Is that the one you used? Okay, so promo code when you use promo code Kingpilled, you'll get mud water, and you'll also get a 17th of a share of ownership in mud water. That's what we're giving out today. The 17 is deliberate. So speaking of sponsor, we've actually got ourselves a sponsor now, like an actual sponsor. I mean, we love mud water, and we really appreciate what they've done for us. They've gone out of their way to sponsor us in such a great way. But now we have someone else who approached us. And if you like CBD, if you use CBD, then check out Paloma Verde. So Carlos is one of the listeners here. He listens along, and he's usually in the chat as well. Carlos and Vanessa Abelar, they live down in Texas, and they have their own little CBD shop. And their stuff is awesome. I've actually used it before. The reason I reached out to him and said, I love what you have going on there, and I think your stuff is great. They've got really good gummies, And so there's CBD gummies. They've got tinctures. They've got a muscle rub that I've heard really good stuff about from Buck Johnson over at Counterflow. He raves about it. So I'm going to be ordering some here shortly to help me recover from all of this moving around here. But so go to Paloma Verde. That's PALOMAVERDE, palomaverde.com, and then use promo code KING. Very simple. Promo code KING. That will get you 25% off anything in the store. And then if you join their mailing list, you can get an extra 10%. So that gives you 35% off your first order and it's any order over $75.
And, just a quick little Spanish lesson here from Uncle Stevie Boy. Paloma Verde is Spanish for green paloma.
Green paloma, huh?
Yes.
So what's a paloma? We need to ask Carlos.
It's like a name, like in English. I mean, like Steven doesn't have like another translation.
Okay.
It just means Steven. To quote Pulp Fiction, we're in America, our names don't mean shit. That's the same thing. Paloma, just another American name, but it's a green version of that name. That's all.
It would be kind of funny to say like, so it's Paloma. So Paloma Verde means Verde means green, and then Paloma. And so you're like, well, what does Paloma mean? And it's, Paloma means, and say like some French word. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And you say some German word. Well, what does that mean? You just keep tying them all together.
We could go on in circles and circles and circles. That could be a bit that we have.
we definitely were in need of some more bits. So I'm glad that we're coming up with them.
I think that's what all the fans have mentioned, is that we're in need of bits.
The fans love the bits.
So here we go. Pigeon. That's what Paloma means. Pigeon.
Pigeon.
Yeah. Now we got to do German, I guess. Well, we'll let them tune in next week for the German.
Tune in next time for the German lesson.
Yeah.
My sister, actually, it's funny you bring up German. My sister just introduced me to this awesome German word. So I love the way that Germans, they don't just invent a new word.
Careful, Matthew.
Yeah, now we're getting into Germans.
we're a third of the way there. Let's not.
We got to dial it back. We got to slow it down a little.
Yeah.
So I love the way that Germans. I just love the way they do things. I can't get enough of the German methods. And one of my favorite methods is the way that they don't just like invent, they don't like create a brand new word necessarily. They just take other words that have meanings and just mash them together. And they're like, hey, look, we got a new word.
Yeah,
so
I do like that.
So in this case, they have a word for the fear that time is running out to act, often regarding a life goal or opportunity, the fear of missing the boat. So basically FOMO. They have a word for FOMO, and it's Torschlusspanik. And what it means literally is gate shut panic. So like the panic that the gate is going to get shut. They have a gate shut panic, and it's Torschlusspanik. So that's your German lesson for the day. I guess you didn't have to wait till next week for the German lesson.
I'm going to throw that into a conversation and just act like I'm real well educated.
Torschlusspanik.
Yeah, a citizen of the world.
Hey, we got a little shout out on well, not a shout out, but Ven retweeted our link that we were going to go live. So I guess that means we have to behave. We have to talk nice about Ven because he's paying attention. I mean,
do you think
that's new for Steven?
Yeah. Do you think that Vin would love my my impression of Vin's like loser twin brother, Vinny? You think he would love that?
I think he probably would, because I do think that he's a fan of Steven in general. So I think that he would probably enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, we'll save the Vinny impression for another day. We have serious things to discuss.
So Vin went and got himself in a little war of the words with our dear friend of the show, Dave Smith. And man. Okay, so I was gonna start out. I was gonna be a little critical of Vin, because I was gonna say that I think it depends on what he's trying to do. So if you want to, I should start by saying this: if you are planning to criticize someone for their approach, for their techniques, for their methods, whatever they're doing, you should first ask yourself or ask them what they're trying to accomplish. Because it's possible that like different goals require different means. So if you're in the business of trying to say persuade someone, and you're wanting to start a conversation with them for the purposes of ending the conversation with them on your side, then you'll approach that conversation differently than if you're starting a conversation with someone for the sake of proving a point or for the sake of making a point. And so I'm going to start under the assumption that Vin was trying to persuade Dave. He was trying to get Dave's attention to start a conversation to persuade him. I don't think that's what he was doing, but I'm going to pretend it was. So
you don't think that's what he's doing?
No, I don't. After a long contemplation, it took me a little bit, but after a long contemplation, I came to the conclusion that I think he probably wasn't trying to persuade Dave. He was, pardon me using this phrase, he was punching up. So it's not that Dave is necessarily bigger or better or anything than Vin. Dave just has a larger audience, and Vin just released a book, and he wants to get that book in front of a larger audience. So it's a time-tested, proven tactic that a good way to get people's attention and get them paying attention to you is by going after someone with a larger audience than you. If you do that, the best thing that can happen for you is that they can respond to you, because once they've responded to you, you win. Any publicity is good publicity. If your goal is to market yourself, the first thing you have to do is actually get on people's radar. So if you have someone who has a similar audience to you, if there's crossover, if the people who pay attention to that person are likely to be interested in something you have to offer, then sometimes the best way to get their attention is by just coming out swinging and just smack them across the face and then wait for them to do something. If they ignore you, then hey, no big deal, nothing lost. At the very least, it makes it at the very least, you talking to them gives the impression that you, at least in some sense, are in the same circle as them. So now I don't think that the difference between Vin and Dave's audiences is really that significant. It's that in this particular area, it's very, Vin spent seasons on a globally famous TV show. He was the star of I think it was Showtime's Gigolos. And he's had people, he's been in foreign countries and had people walk up to him on the street and say, "Hey, you're that guy from the show." So it's not that Vin's audience is small necessarily. It's that his reach within libertarians is still relatively limited. So if his goal is to reach libertarians, one of the best ways to do that is to go after someone who is well known within the libertarians, especially if that someone tends to be easily provoked. And in this case, he picked a couple people who tend to be pretty easily provoked. And sure enough, one of them was provoked. So Vin posted a link to the recent episode where Dave Smith and Tom Woods were talking about vaccine passports. And this is what Vin tweeted. He said, "The cognitive dissonance on display here is remarkable. Tom Woods and Dave Smith," and he tagged them, "think vaccine passports being forced on the population is a real possibility, and think the LP National, the National Libertarian Party, and or the Mises Caucus is worth spending time on," with a facepalm emoji. So when I said that I did this big, long bit of contemplation to decide whether I thought he was trying to be provocative or persuasive, it was about the amount of time it took me to read to the last bit of the tweet where there's the facepalm emoji, and that's what tipped me off. That's where I realized, hey, this is about a little something else. Now, I don't, where I would maybe differ with Vin in this case would be, I don't know if the benefits of getting Dave's attention that way, getting the publicity, I don't know if that is worth the cost of, because like Dave, all this is going to do with Dave is it's going to make him dig his heels in even more. He's pot committed. There's no way he can back down from what he's set into at this point. From his perspective, without losing a ton of face. He is 100% balls deep in this take over the LP thing, and he's going to do it. He can't, there's no backing out now. And from his perspective. So really our only hope, we don't have a hope of talking him out of it. the best we can do at this time is just accept it as a given that that's going to happen, and then try to influence the message that he delivers or the approach that he takes. It's kind of like just putting it in the past. It's like it's a given he's going to do that. So, if he's going to do it, it's kind of like my perspective with the president. If the president's going to be the president, well, I'd rather him be a better president than a worse president. If he's not a good president, I'm not going to get super bent out of shape about it. What I'm going to focus on is the stuff where he's really bad. But it's a little different. But in this case, I don't really know if the cost of turning Dave into an enemy and hardening him even more from listening to people who say stuff along these lines, I don't know if that's worth it. I also don't think it's the end of the world. I think that at the very least, I think if through this whole process, if it means getting more people paying attention to this message, then, perhaps that's worth it. If you just assume that Dave's never going to have any sort of change of heart, then, I guess however many people we can get focused on actually doing something that matters, that'd be a good thing. So to clarify for anybody who doesn't understand what Ven's point was in the tweet, what he's pointing out is that Tom and Dave are holding these two concepts that should be like mutually exclusive, and they're valuing them at the same time. So it's like they have a conversation about vaccine passports, and then they turn off the part of their brain that remembers they just had a conversation about vaccine passports, and they go over and talk about how the LP is like a worthy endeavor. It's a worthy thing to attempt to marshal toward the end of spreading liberty. And if you think that vaccine passports are a real possibility, if you think that the population is psychologically primed and willing to accept that, if you think that that's like a realistic policy that's gonna be coming down, then there should be no part of you that thinks, maybe this is the time to get involved with a third party. Like a third party campaign attempt is something that you do in peacetime. It's something that you do when everything's settled down and relaxed and prosperous and whatever else. Because you're not actually trying to accomplish anything with it, like anything of substance. You're like marketing for yourself, and maybe you can use it. Maybe you can be super savvy and like get certain things into the conversation that the national conversation, like the thing that the Libertarian Party of Kentucky did, where they had that tweet about they said something like that the vaccine passports are going to be akin to the yellow star that the Jews had to wear in Nazi Germany. And that got, it went uber viral and had all the blue checks all up in a tizzy about it. That sort of thing's useful, but like it doesn't require, like, you just have your account, and your account's associated with the party, and they post a little shit post, and it hit a vein, and it redirected the conversation. People started talking about this subject. It was the news cycle for at least a few hours. Everyone was talking about this tweet from that Libertarian Party Twitter account. That's the sort of thing, that's like the best that you can hope for from the political arena, is that you can influence the conversation here and there on specific things. But you're not presenting like a coherent platform that's ever has any hope of doing anything or going anywhere. You might be able to get local officials elected who can influence their school board or something like that. Like that's where you might be able to make a dent. But like at this point where you have vaccine passports being talked about, you're not going to get into a third party run, because that's like a third party run's like, hey, let's try to plan for something 30 years from now. Vaccine passports are being talked about being implemented now. Whatever like fledgling political movement you can get started to like lay the groundwork for your kids to have an alternative to vote for, like this isn't the time. Now is the time for number one, doing whatever works, supporting whoever. So like for me, if someone comes out, if I was going to vote in an election, vaccine passports would be my only issue. That's all that I care about right now. I don't care about any other issue. I care about vaccine passports. Maybe that and guns. But like that's the single issue. That's all that matters. And it's not like none of the other stuff matters because this thing here is the most urgent, immediate problem. I mean, then, but like obviously we don't have an election right now, so then there is nothing in the political sphere that means anything related to this vaccine passport. There's nothing right now.
I wish there was a big election that happened sometime recently that libertarians could have totally ignored and stuck to the company line of it didn't matter who was president.
Right. Yeah.
Why, and I don't know. I really do try to go back and take a look because like we obviously took a particular stand on that, and I try to think about it every once in a while. I wonder if we were correct on that. I wonder if like how we would have been wrong. I guess I can see a possibility where a lot of the same stuff ends up happening if Trump is president, but I kind of have to try pretty hard. Just because I think he sort of emboldened a lot of people who would have been more inclined to buck this stuff, and I think that the system at large would not have seemed like such just so insurmountable. Jeff Dice put it in a way of that like Trump being elected kind of spoke against this like predeterministic view of politics, which I think I still probably closely agree to the predeterministic view of politics, but I think it might have just, like you said, it just might have given enough breathing room to have the terrible shit not get so terrible for a little while. If Trump had been in there. And I think also, with the libertarians not really having anything to say about the voter squad for the most part, I think it was a really great opportunity to just kind of show just like, yeah, this is how messed up this whole system is. This whole thing is just so screwed that, it really, it has to kind of go away in one capacity or not. And I think that would have, there was a lot of opportunity to appeal to like the Bernie bros, and a lot of those people. And you could have done that in the name of, you could have had it, the word libertarian or Libertarian Party attached to that. And that would have been a great opportunity. But just to the course of action I saw for the most part was, just to kind of make fun of, disenfranchised Trump supporters, beat up on them a little bit, while Trump was kind of like thrashing to stay in there. And then now you fast forward and, you see Biden, coming through with all this gun control stuff, and he's going to continue to build the wall. And, this is just the typical libertarian, things that I've been seeing is just, kind of looking at, oh, well, they're going to the line of, now it's time to just give it to the left, right? And so just say, oh, look, there hasn't been any mean tweets, and kind of take that line, making fun of the people who voted for Biden. But I think with Vin's tweet, he was just kind of saying, I don't think he was coming from a pro-Trump standpoint, certainly, but it's like, hey, there's big boy problems that are happening. There's real shit going on. So if you truly care about this, then it would be, if you look at some praxeology, it seems that it's more important to you just to kind of like make fun of both sides, or just do the thing where you feel intellectually superior. And I don't know, what are you actually doing? Do you really believe that this is a huge problem? Is this a money-making thing for some people? What is it? And so it just points that there's bigger incentives for people. I'm going to mute myself.
I think you're onto something there with the potential alternate incentives. I think that's probably playing a pretty big role. And I won't say more than that because I don't want to get into the business of slander necessarily. I just I think you touched on something there. Here's with the past election. Here's the route that libertarians could have taken. So they could have, even if there was I almost said it. Even if there was no voter squad, even if there was no funny business, it's a perfect opportunity to get a whole bunch of people looking really closely and really paying attention, like what's actually happening behind the curtain. It was an opportunity to pull the curtain back and say, hey, look how this works. Look at all the different details of this. People have this impression that they show up and they like take a box and they drop the ballot in, and then it just gets counted and included, and there's not like any steps in between. But this was a great opportunity to say, look at all the different steps in here. Look how easy this is to fix. Look at all the different opportunities. How many individual people's honesty the whole system depends upon. How can you possibly think that this is legitimate? How can you possibly think that there's no funny business here? You could take that approach if there was no voter squad. But since it was pretty obvious that there was a significant amount of voter squad, the route they went was, well, no vote is legitimate anyway, so, every vote is illegal. Or like whatever stupid shit that just makes people look at you like you're a goofball. And it makes them take you and your ideas even less seriously. So the route that they could have taken it was like what I was trying to get across is this should be the single issue that you're talking about. This should be the only thing that's happening right now. Is look, it's fake. This whole thing is faked. Look at all these different details. Look at how they're stealing this. Look at deliberately what they're doing. Look how clear it is. This is the best opportunity ever to completely discredit the system. And there's a couple different routes it could go from there. Maybe people are like, well, yeah, it's faked, but oh, good, we saved it. So maybe it all works, and somehow the whole thing is audited, and Trump winds up continuing in office. And you might say, oh, people are going to be like, oh yeah, we'll see how good the system is. We were able to fix it. And might make people trust the system even more. Sure, okay, perhaps. But now they're super tuned into exactly how everything works, which is where you want them to be if you want them to see the opportunities for it to be discredited. And then maybe it doesn't work and he winds up ousted, but now all of these people just saw how blatantly fraudulent and goofy the whole thing was. I don't know what words to use here to not get myself get a black helicopter outside my house, but
how Times article the whole thing was. Shadowy and
cabal-like. Like it was such a perfect opportunity to get that message through to people, and at the very least, obviously whoever they is in the mind of a libertarian, obviously they want to get away with this thing. So if you make it very, very hard for them to get away with it, by definition, you're working against them. By definition, you're slowing down the encroachment upon liberty. So this is the same thing where they're like, oh, well, Trump is exactly like Bush and Clinton and Obama. Like, he's no different at all. So that's why they're so desperate to get him out of there, because he's exactly like them, and he's just as controlled as anyone else, and there's no difference. Like, I'm not under the illusions that he's some Murray Rothbard, or that him being reelected means that Ancapistan will be ushered in the next 18 months. Obviously, that's not the case. But it's like I heard people making the case that they were like, well, libertarians, you don't want libertarians to be known as the people who are fighting for voter integrity. And someone who says that has way too zoomed out of you're looking at... Nobody has that sort of time horizon where they're going to be like, oh, now libertarians are the voter integrity people. Deal with each situation as it arises. You don't need to worry about what people are going to think about libertarians in the future. Deal with this situation. And when this situation is resolved one way or the other, deal with the next situation. And then in the meantime, be building for the long term. Because ultimately, and this is what Ven's getting at with this tweet to Dave. Ultimately, if you don't have an alternative, then telling people to stop picking this option is pointless. You're shouting into the void. There is no alternative. We haven't built something else. Like when people go out shopping for government services, they have one place to shop. And people say, well, that's because the government doesn't allow any others. This is a monopoly on power. Right. So treat it as a constant and figure out how to build around it. They're going to stop you at all different... This is reality. This is what life is. there are no alternatives to the state, so the state continues to persist. And Dave's approach here, where I love, like Ven's other tweet, he says in quotes, "They're setting up a new caste system in America. If only we could get them all to read a volume of Human Action, they would see the light and reverse course." That's fantastic. There is,
yeah, I mean, it's pretty twatty, but yeah, I mean, it sounds like something I would say, kind of.
Yeah. Like, I can see why Dave was not happy.
Yeah. I mean, look, and there's a special place in my heart for both of these guys. I can just imagine either one of them going after you, just not being real pleasurable, just different flavor of not pleasurable. Yeah. But man, I like you using flavor and pleasurable in the same sentence.
Well,
there's just things I'd enjoy more than waking up and seeing that either Dave Smith or Vin Armani. I mean, unless it's after one of our conversations where, you know, I get Vin's wheels spinning from just, you know, sort of what goes on up here. But like in sort of like some sort of negative context, there's a bunch of Twitter mentions of me, and it's either Dave Smith or Vin Armani. That's going to be probably a long day. You know what I mean? I'll have to take some alpha brain or just disconnect my phone for a month. You know what I mean? There's probably more fun things. And real quick, before I let you get back to it here, special shout out to Frank Brink. Mike Brancatelli is in the chat, and I guess he's going to be talking to Vin here in a little bit. Record it and then and post it. So
right on.
That's pretty cool.
Right Mike Brancatelli. Yeah.
Have not.
What's up? For anyone who doesn't know, he used to be he was the old, I don't even remember what the guy's name is now on Part of the Problem. Robbie
the Fire Bernstein.
Yeah, he was Robbie before Robbie was Robbie. And that was the good old days with Part of the Problem. That's when I started listening.
And
that's great.
I hope that you have like sort of a bookmark of where you were. But what I was just kind of thinking, you're talking about the good old days. I'm trying to just take a look at, you know, Vin and Dave, and you got to rewind a little bit before, you know, the year of 2020 to really get a feel for it, because I think a lot of people who were attracted to Dave saw him kind of on a path where he was exploring these issues that were outside of, I think, typically what a lot of libertarians were talking about at the time. He was getting into, you know, the importance of culture. He asked the question publicly, you know, why is it that so many people that I agree with tend to be religious? What, you know, is there anything to that? He was exploring these ideas that were really interesting. And he was kind of, you know, when he was, I think, probably consuming a lot of Jordan Peterson, talking about how having a family was changing his life, and all these just really non-typical libertarian autistic conversations. Well, I mean, a healthy amount of autism, I'm sure, but he was just sort of expanding, right? And I think a lot of people were waiting for him to sort of take the next step. And then this year of 2020 came, and it seems like for the most part, he's just kind of just staying very much where he was at pre-2020. And so then you have Vin, who's just like, am I going to stay where I am pre-2020? I'm going to build a spaceship. All right. And then, and so just in terms of where, you know, the thought and the conversation went, you know, there's just this chasm now, but I just think there's so many people out there, which I think part of what this show is really is a reaction to getting outside of like the typical paradigm of where, you know, maybe we were used to thinking, you know, and just kind of saying, oh man, there's this guy, Curtis Yarvin. This seems pretty interesting. This challenges some of my ideas. I wonder what he has to say, and what that makes me think. Oh, man, this guy Vin Armani has just totally had this tirade on Pete Quinones' show, where he's talking about the spirit of libertarianism and kind of talking about how it is actually a spiritual ideology. It's actually born of God. It's a mystical proposition that people don't realize is mystical. That's really interesting. And, you know, just having all those ideas come together, I hope that those two are able to speak, because, you know, they're representative of different areas of thought. I'd love to have Yarvin and Vin and Dave all just in a blender and just figure it out. Because for me, let's run it. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people to sort of have a conversation that's outside of whatever the framing that they want to have. And that someone like Dave is going to frame things in a particular way. Vin has his area that he's very comfortable operating in that area. And it would just be interesting to just watch people in some kind of good faith, maybe. And, they're both entertainers, which is why there's a lot of this extra stuff. But, they're both in business, and, they both know how the world of entertainment works. They know how marketing works. But man, if that conversation ever happens, it would just be interesting to see where the overlap is. And if they can converse in a place that that exchange of ideas just makes things clear, because I think a lot of people are looking for some kind of clarity, and a lot of good things would happen if those two talk.
I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that kind of talk isn't going to happen, or at least not anytime soon.
Yep, probably not.
I just looking here, someone said, so Top Lobster, shout out to Top Lobster on Twitter, in regards to a debate between Dave and Vin, he said, might be too late for a useful debate. They were both pretty hostile toward each other. And Dave said, I responded in kind, fuck that guy. And Vin quote tweeted it and said, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the man claiming that he has the strength, temperament, and wisdom to lead the Libertarian Party into a new, bright future. So now that the thought just occurred to me that could have been like a shit test from Vin toward Dave. Like, how do you handle someone criticizing you? How do you handle, like a curveball coming at you? How's your response? What's your response like? And well, he found out. I mean, Dave's never really claimed to be a politician. He's a comedian. He's a Legion of Skanks comedian, but he's going into the game of politics. That's where he's headed. And this is how the game of politics works. So how do you comport yourself? I think that there's what's happening here is Dave is the disconnect. The disconnect that they have is time horizon. Vin is thinking on a generational time scale, and Dave is thinking maybe 3 years, something like that. Vin is tracking this trajectory. This is one thing that you get when you start getting into post-libertarian thought, is you realize that libertarianism is something that requires a society that embraces very low time preference. People have to be willing to sacrifice, to put off for the future. They have to be willing to not be impulsive. Like impulsiveness and materialism don't work for libertarian. Like those two things are completely incompatible. So if you have a culture that's impulsive and materialistic, they're never going to adapt themselves to a libertarian society. They're never going to create one. They're going to rail against it. They're going to rebel against it. And ultimately, libertarians like to mock people who talk about a social contract, but the fact of the matter is, the NAP is a social contract. Like that's what if you want people to abide by the NAP, you want them to police themselves according to a social contract. And if they're willing to, then they'll be willing to outsource to an institution that polices according to the NAP. But it starts with the people. That starts with the people themselves. And really what it starts with is the story that the people tell themselves. People, we build our lives on narratives. So we imagine ourselves as a player in a narrative, and we imagine how that narrative is going to go, and then we act accordingly. This is why sometimes people will say, for like advice, if you're struggling with something or struggling with a decision, imagine that you're the star of a movie, and what would the star of the movie do next? What would make the best movie? And because that's kind of how the world operates according to those principles, because humans operate according to those principles. We visualize ourselves as members in a narrative, and we act accordingly. So right now, the most popular narrative is one that incentivizes impulsiveness and materialism and lack of empathy and all these sorts of things. And while people are imagining themselves that way, while people imagine that the narrative they participate in is like that, they'll never be open to libertarian ideas. This isn't when you said earlier about Vin and Dave both understanding marketing, I kind of cocked my head a little bit because Vin understands marketing. Dave doesn't. That's Dave's biggest issue, is that he can't, maybe it's self-awareness, I don't know, but like, he doesn't see just how unappealing his rhetoric is to the majority of people. So his problem isn't, he thinks that the issue here is that not enough people have heard about libertarians, and if they would just hear about them, everything would be great. People have every opportunity to hear about libertarians. The internet exists. You don't have to be part of a political party just for people to be aware of your ideas. The political party is a place where people who already have these ideas, where they go to exercise them. The political party is the application of the ideas. It's not the development of them. The ideas have to develop much further back. And then people who have those ideas are like, hey, let's go organize somewhere. And then they go, so you can never use a political party is not a messaging platform. So anyone who says that using the LP is about messaging, they're out of their depth. They have no idea what they're doing. You can reach people through a political party platform. That's possible. But the people have to already be inclined to hear the message, and they have to be looking for it. And we need more people who are looking for it. And you're not gonna do that through let me qualify that. On an urgent timeline, you're not going to be successful through a political party. Going the route of the political party to message is a very long game. And Dave doesn't recognize that. So Vin is operating on a generational time scale. He's following the trajectory from not just decades or centuries ago, from millennia ago. He's watching the trajectory and the cycles through time and through history and the way that these sorts of things progress. And right now, all things being considered, we're on a rapid timescale toward a rapid pace or trajectory toward something major, something significant. So if right now you want to make a difference, going and investing yourself in an absolute tire fire of a political party that's going to take multiple election cycles, 2, 4, like years, to start really having an impact, it's just a massive waste of time. If you're a libertarian, you should understand the idea of opportunity cost. This is an example. The opportunity cost of getting involved in the LP is wildly out of alignment or disproportionate with basically anything else, whether it's self-preservation or organizing something locally and creating a community or innovating in some sort of technology or even something like creating a movie or a TV show or a documentary or anything like that, or getting yourself like booked on, coming up with some way to get yourself booked on major networks to fit your message in. If they're like, oh, they don't want to hear my message, and you think that you're going to be successful delivering it through a political party, you have to figure out the message that's going to sell to them. If they aren't buying, come up with something they will buy and Trojan horse your way in there. So it's just, that's the disconnect between Dave and Vin. Is Vin recognizes that the task that Dave is setting himself up for is basically like it's like digging a grave with a spoon. And Dave is like, he's like, we got to get right to work. We got to start right now. We got to work with what's right in front of us. And I got me a spoon here. So I'm going to get down on my hands and knees. And I'm just going to start digging this grave with the spoon. And Vin is like, I'll be right back. And he's turning around. He's walking away. And Dave is like, hey, where are you going, man? We got to dig. We got spoons right here. Here, I've got an extra spoon. You can use it. We got to dig. We got to get to work. And Vin's like, no, give me a minute. And he just walks away. And then he grabs an excavator and drives back and goes and digs the grave with one scoop. this is the sort of we have to build the excavator. If you want to try to dig with the spoons, you're going to be dead before you've finished digging the grave. You need to get the excavator, but the excavator has to be built. So Vin is in the process of building the excavator. So, and then once you're okay, we're going to build the excavator. Then the question is how to build the excavator, and that's where people's minds need to be right now. Is how to build the excavator. Because that's like the grand question. That's where all of this runs up against. Libertarians have been around, have been talking about these messages for decades. And the government of 2021 is, how would you say this? If you take the government of 2021 and the government of, say, 1970, and you look at the trajectory of growth there, and then you take libertarianism in 1970 and libertarianism in 2021, you're looking like a flat line of growth in the size of the libertarian ideology over the last 50 years compared to like a vertical spike in the growth and expanse of government over that same period of time. So I don't know what makes people think the answer is just keep doing the same thing, but more. It's just not taking us anywhere. It hasn't, and it's not going to. Now, there was another tweet here that
yeah, while we're doing this, I think this is a chat's popping. I don't know, I guess we had Vin retweet the thing, and then you tagged people on Twitter and stuff like that because you understand marketing. But give them the thing that you say when you talk about liking the show and pressing the thumbs up and the whole thing that helps all this stuff.
Yeah, I forgot to do that.
Welcome to Kingpilled.
Welcome to Kingpilled, folks. I'm Matt. You can follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled, and Steven does not want you to follow him on Twitter at Messina Inc. If this is your first time watching, fantastic. Do us a favor, subscribe to our channel. If you're listening to the audio version of this some point after the fact, then subscribe to us on iTunes or whatever, Spotify or wherever the show is, wherever you found it, and then share this message. We want more people to get to hear this, because our goal, like, we view the problem of the state as an engineering problem. It's not a moral problem. Everyone's having this moral discussion and they want to talk about, how evil the Fed is or whatever. We need to think beyond that. This is an engineering problem that we need to solve through human ingenuity and innovation. And it just so happens that many of these questions have been addressed and dealt with and answered in the past, but we collectively have forgotten those answers. We've been indoctrinated, in essence, and we've been trained to think about issues of politics and religion and the state and all these things through a very, very narrow scope. And there's a whole lot, if you step outside that, if you burn the 3x5 card of allowable opinion and you step outside that, there's some pretty interesting ways of looking at the world. And we happen to think that they give you a lot more clarity, and they make you, they really give a lot of clarity on a path forward, what we can do to actually start making a difference here. And again, it comes down to engineering. We need to engineer the solutions. And the state exists as it does because of market demand. People have chosen an expansive totalitarian state because, as H.L. Mencken said, people don't want liberty. They want security. They want to be safe. When you go out and you talk to people about freedom and liberty and the average citizen, people should be able to own nukes and all these different things, it doesn't matter that you're right. It matters that you freak people out and that people don't want to live in that world. You've described a world to people that they don't want to live in. And if they don't want to live in it, then they're never going to choose it. They're going to keep going back to the thing that they've been trained to choose until someone presents them a viable alternative. If you do any study of marketing, you realize that, like, your call to action has to be compelling, and there has to be one. You need one call to action: go do this. And if people aren't following your call to action, if people aren't doing the thing you want them to do, that's on you. It's not their fault that you haven't made your product compelling to them. That's your fault. That's your problem. You need to go back to the drawing board and you need to make your product compelling to them. And once you have, then they will act. The libertarian message is DOA. The libertarian political message is completely dead on arrival. It never has a chance. It will never get out of the gates because it's culturally completely unpalatable. And when you're trying to get this message out, you're battling against the most sophisticated, expansive mind control culture in history. All the best mind control tools that have ever been created are actively working against you. So you have to be smart. Your ideas, you can't survive on the truth of your ideas. You have to survive on the fitness of your ideas. Whatever survives is what will work by definition because it survived. The libertarian political message is making no headway for all intents and purposes. Libertarians are just sitting around talking to themselves. They're not actually making a dent on the culture at large. And it's in large part because every time they get the opportunity to, they make the perfect the enemy of the good. There is no perfect to be had in politics. Your principles don't matter. Principles are completely irrelevant in politics. I like to say that principles are just decorations on the tombs of dead men. If following your principles leads to your destruction, literally or metaphorically, then who's the actual enemy of your principles? You, like the person who's destroying you, or you who's teeing yourself up to be destroyed? If you want your principles to survive and last and spread, you have to think strategically and pragmatically about the actions that you take. Politics doesn't have to be your God. You don't have to deify it. But nobody has identified themselves more with the state than libertarians. Anarchists especially. They literally define themselves in opposition to the state. There was actually this perfect tweet on this. I have to see if I can find it. It said, if your identity, this was John F. Miller 86. He got a fantastic account on Twitter. He said, if your identity is derived from critiquing someone else's identity, then you don't have an identity. Someone else does. That's the position ANCAPs are in. You've literally defined yourself, anarchist, as an opposition to the state. Your entire identity is bound up in the state. If the state just disappeared tomorrow, say we just snapped our fingers and everyone woke up tomorrow Rothbardian anarchist and the state just dissolved away, what would you do with yourself? What are you doing now? If you like as our good friend Jason Stapleton likes to say, are you a 30-year-old working at Best Buy? Because if you're a 30-year-old working at Best Buy...
Shut up, Jason Stapleton! So what? And I work nights at Jimmy John's too, so I get my hustle on.
Now, I want to be sure that if there's someone who, they're just starting to make their way to some of these ideas, and they just happen to be a 30-year-old who worked at Jimmy John's, but they're working on not being a 30-year-old who works at Jimmy John's. Great, good for you. You don't have to feel like we're shitting on you. The point here is to pick kind of a stereotype.
31 soon, and then you're gonna show.
The point here is to pick a to pick like a stereotype or a parody of someone that they're not contributing anything of value to the world, and they think that they come home and they shitpost on the internet and I'm bringing about liberty. Liberty is not going to be a numbers game. This is libertarians, when they think it's a numbers game, they think it's like we just have to persuade enough people to be libertarians and then we'll be magically usher in Ancapistan. You're falling into the democracy trap. You claim to not believe in democracy, but you're operating according to democratic principles, assuming that this is just a matter of persuading enough people to share your political view, and then they'll vote the state away. Dave explicitly said, we need to use a political party to go explain to people why they don't need to use a political party. I thought he was kidding when he said it. I think it was when he was talking to Hotep Jesus. I thought he was kidding. I was like, you don't get to have performative contradictions. Only leftists get to have performative contradictions. You don't.
That's true.
So if you think If your message was so good, you wouldn't need the political party. But your message sucks. Nobody wants it. Nobody's interested. Nobody's buying. So you have to figure out how to get people to buy, which means you need to understand people. You need to understand persuasion. You have to understand marketing. You have to understand how to get to people who don't already agree with you and get them to choose your vision of the world. That's what leadership is convincing people who don't agree with you to follow you and go with you. Right now, all of the as much as I love Dave and Tom and they've done great work, and I owe a debt of gratitude to them for the way that they educated and entertained me to this point. But there comes a time where you have to realize what is and isn't working. If your podcast, your YouTube channel, if they're growing like gangbusters and you're converting people, then do that. What are you getting into politics for? Are you getting into politics because, hey, it's an opportunity to market myself and ultimately I just want to make a bigger name for myself? Okay, great. Then say that. Say that's what you're doing. Be honest. Don't go promise a bunch of naive young kids who look up to you. Don't send them on a wild goose chase, tilting at windmills in a way that's going to get them designated domestic terrorists. Right. Because that's where the Mises Caucus is headed. The Mises Caucus is going to become the new Proud Boys if they accomplish anything. That's what will happen to them. And you're when you make this message, I'll say one more thing and I'll let you go. Yeah. When you, Dave, or anybody else who's advocating people get involved in the party, when you're painting this picture, like we're going to take over the political system, or we're like, because in fairness to them, they don't think that they explicitly claim we're not trying to actually accomplish anything. We just trying to get, just messaging. Politics is not the realm for that. And if you're sucking people into doing that, instead of doing something of actual value, there's your opportunity cost. Now those guys aren't doing something of actual value, but it's worse than that because you're also putting them in a position where they're going to be potentially targeted as political dissidents. Right. And that's going to be on you.
That's right. And so everyone involved, it should be able to kind of know better. So we have been talking about this for a while now, which isn't good for us that we've been talking about it, but just through some observation of the past year or so, we've said everything that we've said before. So if we are able to see it, a lot of those people also should be able to see it themselves. And if you truly do think that vaccine passports are a real possibility, that things are at that stage, then the idea of being affiliated with a party who 3 seconds after Biden got inaugurated was being likened to domestic terrorists and white supremacy and all that on national television by the former CIA director, you have to understand that negative consequences of being associated with that, those are also real possibilities, right? If we're at a point where medical passports are on the table, there's plenty of other bad shit that could be right behind that. So yes, when you are talking to an audience of people who are a little bit younger, a little bit more naive, and haven't really figured out their place politically, but kind of share some of the sensibilities that you might, there's a certain responsibility there beyond just growing your audience or just selling something. People need to sell stuff, and people need to have an audience if they're going to sell stuff or if that's what their livelihood is. But yeah, there should just be some more consideration given to that, certainly. So when the Mises Caucus, like we said, started to make a little bit of waves, that's when the hit pieces started, and I think maybe specifically with Dave. So you can kind of see that, when you start to be out there, that's when you get the negative attention, right? And so it's very quick that people who can control language, can rapidly change the meaning of words to a way that, to the detriment of, a small amount of people who are politically engaged, with those people. And, if you remember just a few months ago, they were really trying to broaden that out to, damn near half the country. They wanted, when people were floating out these ideas of lists and who voted for Trump and, different Trump supporters and having consequences for all that language that was out there. There will be a time, maybe that faded away, but there will be a time where that gets more momentum than it did. So they're happy to push things as far as they're able to. And so, they might take their foot off the gas when something, looks like it's really not going to go anywhere. But even if something like those lists don't exist now, if there's a situation that they can exploit, down the road, 6 months or a year from now, 2 years from now, life is, you got some years to live. And we saw, just with 2019 to 2020, how quickly things can change. So there's no guarantee that they're not going to change for the worst again. In fact, it's very likely, because that's
absolutely
things
it's going to happen fast.
Things tend to fall apart. And, I think people for a long time have, there's no secret that the empire is falling apart, and it's not going to necessarily get prettier.
Right. And what are you going to pull them away to? Like, what are you trying to get them to choose? Libertarianism is a negative proposition. It just says the state is bad and you guys shouldn't have it. You guys shouldn't use it. Okay, well, what should they use instead? You don't have anything to fill that void. You don't have anything to put in there. Those things don't exist. They haven't been invented yet. They have to be invented. It's technologies. It's technologies, number one, like actual, like literal, like physical technologies, like blockchain type stuff or whatever it's going to be. But then it's also cultural technologies, like religious beliefs that bind people together, whatever that is. If your religion is the nap, fine, whatever. You could build a society on a small scale around just the nap. If you have all people who believe in it and are willing to be bound by it. But right now we have no alternative. We have no competition. If libertarians believe in competition, but there is no competition to the state. They'll say, oh, the state doesn't allow it. Quit bitching and do it, like, figure it out anyways. That's the only alternative we have. The only alternative we have is to treat the state as a constant and build around it. Because the surest way to get the worst version of the state is to attack it head on, is to go directly up into its face and poke it in the eye. That's how you get totalitarianism. The reason that Stalin and Mao and Hitler and whomever else like that, the reason that they were murderous totalitarians was not because they had power. It was not because they had absolute power. It wasn't because they were dictators. It was because their power was threatened. Power that is threatened is the worst kind of power. If people are going to have power, you want to make sure that it doesn't have any threats, because then they have no reason to kill people unless they just happen to be sadistic, which is, people like that tend to not get into those sorts of positions as sadists, because people don't really like to be around sadists and they don't trust them. But the thing that happened with them was they needed to kill all the dissidents. They needed to kill people who were threats to their power. A king with absolute power in a society that respects that they have absolute power, they have much less need to get all stabby because they have power. You don't see anybody going after the Crown Prince of Liechtenstein, Hans Adam, who happens to be basically an ANCAP. Nobody's going after him and trying to kill him because, and he doesn't have absolute power, but he's got, in his region, he has more absolute power than the President of the United States within his realm. And he uses it. They've built an incentive structure where he is incentivized to manage his people well, to treat them well. It's just incentives. It's an engineering task. But if you want to get the most insecure, lashing out, violent form of the government, then start attacking it. Go right at it. That's the surest way to be crushed by it. It's interesting. This is one thing that when we talk to Vin, this is something that I want to talk to him about is Curtis Yarvin and what Curtis Yarvin believes, because Vin's been talking about it a lot lately, and I think he hasn't read enough. It sounds to me like he hasn't read enough Yarvin, and he's putting words in his mouth that aren't there. Because one of my favorite things about Yarvin, it took me a while to get it, but one of my favorite things about him is his prescription for us, like right now, until whatever's going to replace the regime exists. Here's how you should behave now. He calls it passivism, not pacifism, passivism. And he says, I'm reading from the Gentle Introduction to Unqualified Reservations. He said that there's 3 steps to the procedure for building. He's just speaking hypothetically, just as an alternative to, say that there was going to be an alternative to the regime. How would you implement it? And he said there's 3 steps. The first one is become worthy. He says, you think I'm kidding, but I'm not. First step, become worthy. What could this possibly mean? Is it Zen? It sure sounds like Zen. It's Zen to the bone, bitches. The first step is the most difficult of the 3 steps. To be frank, it's quite possible that your reaction will never make it past this step, because he distinguishes a reaction from a revolution. He says we're talking about a regime change, but if that regime change is a revolution, it's failed, because revolutions are bloody and violent and result in blood and violence. So he's talking about a reaction. A reaction is peaceful, everyone wins, and we establish new order. He calls it a capital R reaction. He said, to be frank, it's quite possible that your reaction will never make it past the first step. It's more than possible. It's almost certain. But waste your time on the first step. And what have you wasted? Confucius said, to set the world in order, first set yourself in order. He wasn't kidding either. He may well have been reading so-and-so, blah, 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 who taught
Jordan
us.
Peterson.
Yeah. He may well have been reading Eugen Herrigel, who taught us that to release the arrow, one must first not release the arrow. Fact, not even UR is as reactionary as Zen. Another fact, if you show up for your first fencing class, they don't just hand you a bardiche. I'm assuming is how that's pronounced. The procedure too is dangerous. It too has its prerequisites, although it has only one. Before you begin any positive work on the first step, you must master the daunting spiritual discipline of passivism. This exercise itself may consume a lifetime, but with UR's simple and down-to-earth instructions, it will go much more quickly. You may even find that you have already completed it. Here we go. This is the good stuff. The steel rule of passivism is absolute renunciation of official power. We note instantly that any form of resistance to sovereignty, so long as it succeeds, is a share in power itself. Thus, absolute renunciation of power over US government, implies absolute submission to the structure, the new structure. The logic of the steel rule is simple. This is the best sentence. As a reactionary, you don't believe that political power is a human right. When he framed it that way,
damn.
Do you believe that political power is a human right? Because when you say that political power is a human right, that everyone has the right to act, to use political power, to exercise political power, what distinguishes your belief system from communism? Because communism is the outcome of the belief that every single person has a right to political power that is being expressed as voting. So like libertarian, the ANCAP belief is that we need to decentralize power so completely that every single person has a little slice of it. And that's when we know that we've arrived. But then those people need to exercise that power. So how are they going to do it? They're going to consolidate it in someone. And anarcho-capitalism, as it's been conceived to this point, winds up in the exact same place as communism. Because it's everybody ceding their little slice of power to institutions to rule. And they all rule supposedly at the will of the people, which makes people think, okay, well, they're not actually doing their, it clouds the whole thing up. So anarcho-capitalism in practice winds up exactly the same as communism, because it's people believing that political power is a human right. Back to Moldbug. You will never convince anyone to adopt the same attitude without first adopting it yourself. So when you argue against democracy, what you're saying is nobody has a right to political power. It is not a human right. Nobody has a right to it. Now it must be. It exists. It's always going to exist. So, but now we've left the region of rights and morals and ethics, and we've entered into engineering. Political power is going to exist. Nobody has a right to it. So who should have it? That's like the quickest path to the king pill that you could get. As a reactionary, you don't believe that political power is a human right. You will never convince anyone to adopt the same attitude without first adopting it yourself. Since you believe others should be willing to accept the rule of the new structure, over which they wield no power, you must be the first to make the great refusal. They must submit to the new, you must submit to the old. The reactionary's opinion of USG is that it is what it is. It is run by the people who run it. And at present, the present management may well be the best people in the world to run USG. And even if they're not, a reactionary can't imagine what might be done about it, short of replacing the whole thing. This simple and final judgment, like the death penalty, admits no possible compromise. In particular, passivism is to Gandhi as Gandhi is to Hitler. Hitler, before 1933, was a violent democratic activist. Gandhi was a nonviolent democratic activist. Passivism is not any sort of activism. Passivism is passivism. In plain English, you may not even begin to consider the rest of the procedure until you have freed yourself entirely from the desire, built-in burden though it may be of the two-legged ape, for power. You have to renounce the idea that you deserve power or that anyone else deserves power. That's the steel rule, passivism. Don't get involved in the political process. Accept it as it is. Accept it as it is, build around it. Because once you get involved, once you start targeting it, that's when you put yourself on the radar. That's when the eye of Sauron begins to turn toward you. And above all, you want to remain out of the eye of Sauron. That's the worst place that you could possibly be. So now, Dave is bidding for the privilege to become, to get the eye of Sauron fixed on him, which is fine. But he's dragging a bunch of other people with him. And those other people respect him. They believe that they look up to him. They believe that he's someone to trust. And if he says this is worth doing, then they're gonna trust him and they're gonna believe him. And he's leading them on a frickin' locomotive steaming toward a brick wall. That was perfect timing. Locomotive steaming toward a brick wall. Oh, that was great. Okay. So this is why what Dave is doing really frustrates me, because it's not just a matter of oh, you know, it's just not going to work, or we just have a difference of opinion or whatever. It's that he's either so ridiculously naive that he believes what he's saying, in which case he needs to wake the hell up, or he's fully aware of the fact that he's just delivering a marketing pitch, and this is all just kind of like a game to him to raise his own status. And he's going to get a bunch of people believing in a message that he doesn't actually believe in. I don't think that's the case. I think that he genuinely is just this naive, because he's afflicted by the thing that afflicts all libertarians, which is their belief that they have discovered the source code of reality, and that they have solved all of the problems. They have no reason to learn anything new. They've got all the answers. They're Austrian economists, and ergo, they understand everything. And if everybody else would just listen to them, they realize that they already have all of the answers. This is the thing that afflicts so many libertarians. And you can tell, you can see it, because they stop encountering new ideas. They stop talking about new things. You can tell they stopped reading. Yeah. They're just repeating the same thing.
I was just kind of thinking, you know, when Yarvin kind of dropped on the scene, I just wonder, you know, why. I don't think him and Dave ever spoke. I don't think.
No, they
It would
didn't.
have been an interest. Yeah, like I don't, man. That was yeah. It reminds me of a post I saw a bunch of libertarians like scoffing at Yarvin, but clearly hadn't really dove in any meaningful way. And tried to get their head around what he was saying. But man, seems like it would be pretty valuable. Some guy who's just objectively brilliant. I think it'd be hard to make a case that you're not dealing with a really big brain there. At the very least, right? And so, okay, there's a bunch of big brain people, and you can rip them to shreds, with your life experience or whatever else. Okay, go for it. But just to hear that there is a seemingly reasonable critique from a brilliant guy who was a libertarian, seemed to follow like a very predictable path of libertarians where they sort of get to Hoppe, and at the very least, something changes. I guess when he got to Hoppe, he was just like, all right, you're not taking it far enough,
like he's like, oh, the bus stops here, all right, I'll walk.
That's where he built his spaceship.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but just to hear people who haven't really dug in at least a little bit, just for the critiques on libertarianism, just to work a different part of your brain, and keep you sharp, even if you're emotionally committed to defending it, for whatever reason, whether you're invested in it as a career, which I think a lot of people are. But even if you're at the point where you are invested in it as a career, I think, man, people really appreciate, some humility, being open to new ideas and kind of, in just adapting, because, the world absolutely has been changing. And I think that's been so obvious to so many people. It becomes more obvious when you're hearing ideas that aren't adapting to the changes that everyone is experiencing around them.
Yep. Yeah. It's the approach. I can understand why libertarians in general are tired of hearing people criticize libertarians, because
Sure.
It seems like everyone's just always criticizing libertarians. But it's intellectually lazy to just say, oh, if they're criticizing me, then I'm not going to listen. Especially someone who has, like you said, is objectively brilliant. I had someone say before that he was like, oh, I don't want to read Moldbug. He's too wordy. And I was like,
Too wordy.
Yeah, he's wordy, but like so's Rothbard. Nobody has any problem reading Rothbard, and he's like, so is Mises. Like all these guys are super wordy. Yeah. You don't have a problem. It's a lazy excuse, and it's like, oh well, if he has lots of things to say, then I guess he has nothing to say. Or like, yeah, I don't have anything to learn from, and that's really what it is the belief that you don't have anything to learn from anyone. And you can tell when it happens to people, and they have stopped reading, they've stopped engaging with the ideas, and they begin to treat themselves as if everyone else needs to listen to them, and they don't have anything to learn from anyone else. And I guess we don't need to keep beating people up. I gotta get wrapped up here shortly because we got to go to the chiropractor. But I wanted to actually address the title of the show. I called it "The Left is Delusional," and that's why they keep winning. And actually, the way this has gone has been great because we really laid the groundwork for actually this thread that I wanted to cover on the left. It makes even more sense now in this context. Well, let me read it here. So I said yesterday, leftism is fundamentally antisocial and psychopathic. Leftists are empathy deficient. And you can recognize this because this is why they're incapable of understanding the values of conservatives and not even interested in trying. Leftism is ultimately performative empathy. It's people who think that they're being empathetic, but are ultimately self-interested in pursuit of power. If your goal is to pursue power, you'll wind up a leftist because that's where they all go. There's no power to be had on the right. People just fall into the camp of leftism because they want to change the world. They want progress. They don't have status in this existing world, in this existing climate, in this existing hierarchy. So we need to create a new one where I do have status. It's people who don't want to transcend the existing hierarchy, so they want to build a new one, call it progress, and put themselves at the top of it. That's how you wind up as a leftist. So they need to justify that to themselves. So they decide, oh, I'm empathetic. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it for other people. There's a great way for this to manifest itself, and that is in starting a business. When you're starting a business, you're creating a new hierarchy and putting yourself at the top of it, and then you're helping other people with what you do with your business. But if you take that sentiment and you go into politics with it, then it's all self-interested. It's entirely self-interested, but they don't want to admit that, so they say, "Oh, we're doing this for other people." So it's performative empathy, but it's actually it's self-worship. So you'll recognize this. If you pick a random conservative and ask them about key leftist dogmas, they're very likely to describe something that at least passes muster. You might get your boomer cons or something that, you're socialism and they're going to bring socialism to America. You might get that sort of thing. But in general, if you talk to a conservative type of person, they're going to have a pretty good idea of what a leftist believes because it pervades the culture. But if you pick a random leftist and ask them about basic conservative values, I guarantee that they'll describe some sort of goofy, hackneyed caricature. It sounds totally goofy. They can't. Michael Malice and Dave Smith do this thing where they're having these conversations where Michael pretend to be blue-pilled and he'll argue a position and Dave will argue against him. That's a thing that a leftist can't do. They cannot occupy the position of someone who with conservative values and argue that position for them. It will, even the people who are the best at it, like Sam Harris, it comes off as completely disingenuous. So the leftist diagnosis of the right is simply people who are evil. If you're evil, it's because you're on the right. If you're on the right, it's because you're evil. These two things are one and the same. Because they have no clue what conservatives are actually like, leftists assume they're just as bloodthirsty and ruthless as them, but in pursuit of evil conservative things. You see this in the psychology. This is what clicked with me. You see this in their psychology. They have this imagination of all of these elaborate activist structures that are earnestly pushing family values and conservatism and all these different things that the religion and all these other different they have this idea that those structures exist and that they're populated with people who are psychologically like a leftist, where they will say and do anything necessary to accomplish their agenda. So they project their own behavior upon conservatives because they don't know anything else. They've never bothered to actually understand where conservatives are coming. So they just have built up a boogeyman of the evil, aggressive, unprincipled conservative activist or something who's just gonna force God and family down your throat when you're not looking. This is why leftists are so hypervigilant and aggressive toward conservatives. They can't imagine that conservatives could possibly be as doddering, incompetent, and passive as they actually are. By now, you should recognize how this will play out. Leftists are out for blood. Conservatives just want peace. Conservatives have the mentality that let's just see this ground here. Let's agree. Let's just compromise. We need to reach across the aisle and work together, and we'll give you what you want. You give us what we want, and then we'll move forward. And the leftist will shake hands with his finger crossed behind his back. And as soon as he moves on, he's like, okay, he's just not going to keep his end of the bargain. And he moves on to something else. The conservative's like, oh, come on, man. All right, so let's get to this point. All right, I'll give you this, you give me that, and then we'll agree to have peace. They have this imagination where it's like people go and meet in this marketplace of ideas, and we exchange things. We just come to the best compromise that works for everybody. And the leftist, fundamentally politically, will agree to whatever he needs to agree to get his way, and then he'll say it wasn't enough, and he'll keep pushing further. If you want more about that specific subject, look up Anamnesis. We've mentioned him on the show before, and specifically his video called, what is it? It's a Mystery Cult of Power. Look up Anamnesis and Mystery Cult of Power. That video is amazing. So leftists are out for blood. They see boogeymen around every corner, and they think that we're perpetually on the cusp of a complete fascist takeover, and that they're fighting for their lives. They're the wine ants fighting in the French resistance, as Moldbug says. So they think that it's a desperate situation and that they're fighting for their lives. Conservatives are like, I just want to give you whatever is going to make you leave me alone. When you recognize this dynamic, you can see where it's going to go. Eventually, like, leftists are going to just keep harassing and beating people up, ideologically or literally, until finally the conservatives have had enough and they recognize the nature of the game. It all hits them all at once and they all snap. And I said, people will only take relentless leftist predation for so long before they decide to kick conservatives out of the driver's seat on the right. And then the left will have actually created the monster they feared all along. Because right-wing energy, when it gets all rallied behind a single cause, that cause is typically destroy leftists. And when they want to be, right-wingers can be very, very, very good at destroying leftists. Now, what ends up happening is they create an even greater counter reaction. Because then the leftists who survive, they really think that they're up against the wall, because in that case, they kind of are. And the right-winger will think, okay, we accomplished this, we won a great victory, now we'll rest on our laurels. You know, we Constitution, and now we'll just let it go, or whatever. So anyways, it's with that understanding, like, this is how these people react. You have these relentless predators who are perpetually in a state of hyper-vigilant, anxious activism, feeling like their backs are against the wall. They will feel that way no matter what. This is baked into their psychology. It doesn't matter what your system is. They're going to feel that way, and they're going to be trying to reform it for the sake of progress to suit their own ends. When you have a group like that, you're never going to talk people into, let's just nobody have power. You know, let's just all give it up and all, you know, sit around and sing Kumbaya and be governed by our private security forces, and we're just all going to agree to get along and follow the nap. It's just a fundamental impossibility. It will never happen. And that is why the not only is the libertarian political message lacking and will never sell, but the vision of Ancapistan that libertarians have will never work, because it will always be overrun by people like this. Anyways, I've got to get out of here. Do you have anything else you wanted to say here at the end?
No, I do not. I'm muting myself. No, I have something for next time.
All right, sounds good.
So stay tuned. And if you want to hear, of course, if you want to hear Matthew's salty language, and if you want to hear my Jason Stapleton impression, you be sure to join the supporting listeners group.
That's right.
And big thank you to Mike Brancatelli. He said he subscribed and shared the show, and apparently we'll be having Vin on. So keep your eyes peeled for that conversation. That sounds like it will be an interesting one.
Absolutely. Shout out to Mike Brank. It's good to have you in here, brother. We'll see you around. Shout out to Popular Liberty too. He's been holding it down in the comments, and he's really good on Twitter. I think he's at Populist Liberty on Twitter. Just go look at my replies. I've been talking to him recently. Go follow him. Shout out Ken Thoreau. Go follow him as well. And then one more time, I need to make sure I get this first ad read I did. I got it wrong. Carlos and Vanessa, PalomaVerdeStore.com. So for Paloma Verde, CBD products, gummies, tinctures, muscle rubs, whatever you want, they got it. PalomaVerdeStore.com. Use promo code KING for 25% off any order over $75. And if you sign up for their mailing list, you'll get an extra 10%. This has been another episode of King Pilled. I'm Matt. You can follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. That is Steven, Liberal Steve. You can follow Liberal Steve on Twitter at Messina Inc., but you cannot follow Steven there. He is not there. He is not on Twitter. He does not have a social media presence. Like the show, share it, subscribe, and we will see you guys next time.